T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
It takes a shit scene.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. Happy that you guys are spending your Friday afternoon tuning in with the pod and the channel, man. You know, the NFL season is just around the corner. Training camp is about to begin in less than a week. Next week, we are going to start doing our record predictions, college football, NFL. So if you haven't already, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, that you have post notifications turned on so you don't miss when we drop new content and when we go live. Remember that we aren't just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. JT Sports Live and the JT Sports Podcast are available. On this episode, man, we got a really good one. The most overhated NFL players. Which players get more hate than what they deserve? What are the Houston Texans Super Bowl chances? I got some thoughts on the Los Angeles Chargers offense going into this year. Justin Fields, he could be the key to Mike Tomlin avoiding having his first ever losing season down there in Pittsburgh. Georgia, once again, has some more off-the-field issues. For some reason, when you commit to go play football for Georgia, Kirby Smart also may be pitching you the idea of maybe becoming a NASCAR driver if football doesn't work out for you, because Georgia players just love getting into all kinds of mischief on the road. We're going to dive into it. Clemson and Florida State could be heading to a new conference, but they may not be going where you think. And how good is Clemson going to be this year? Because we know that Dabo Swinney has been really stubborn to adapting to the new age of college football involving utilizing the transfer portal. But I don't think that necessarily means the start of Clemson's demise. And there's going to be a lot of chaos happening in the SEC this year. Happy that you guys are tuned in. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and before we dive into it all, here's a quick word from our partner, Aura. In football, we all know that no quarterback can win without good protection up front. It's also important that you protect yourself from data brokers who sell your personal information online to scammers, spammers, and anybody else who may want to target you. That's why you should use Aura, today's sponsor of this episode. or shows which data brokers are passing away your information on the internet and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf. Go to aura.com/JT Sports in description or pin comment down below to get a 14-day free trial and protect your personal information from being exposed online. Cleaning up your information online not only helps reduce the amount of spam you receive, but it also protects you from hackers who could use this info to help gain access into your social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Go to our sponsor, aura.com/JT Sports in the description or pin comment down below to gain access to your 14-day free trial and protect yourself from hackers looking to gain access into your sensitive information online. All right, everybody, let's get into it. Which NFL players get more hate than what they deserve? I'm here to give you guys my list of the league's most overhated players going into the upcoming season. And we got to start off with Chicago Bears rookie quarterback Caleb Williams. This dude hasn't even played a single down in the league yet, and he already has become one of the most overhated quarterbacks in the league. You got people saying he's going to be a buzz. It's just, people just hate Caleb Williams' guts for no good reason at all. People don't like him because he got emotional after USC's loss against Washington. He cried in his mom's arms. Like, you're mad at a player for getting upset about losing? That's just so weird to me. People don't like the fact that he paints his nails different colors. We're in 2024 now, people. You guys should be used to these new age players who are light-skinned and like to express themselves in ways that you probably see as non-traditional. But we're in a new age. This is a new era. And I don't care about what Caleb Williams likes to do with his nails, what he does in his free time. That's his business. All that should matter is if he produces on the field. How good is he going to be for Chicago? If he ends up living up to the hype, then all the stuff that he's getting hate for doesn't really matter. And I'm just so upset at the amount of people who just come at Caleb Williams for no good reason. This dude has been incredible off the field when it comes to bonding with his teammates. You know, his USC teammates had nothing but good things to say about him. His NFL teammates right now really love him. Keenan Allen and him already had a relationship prior to him entering the league. The Caleb Williams hate just is nonstop. Every time they make a post about him on Instagram from the NFL page, you always got people saying he's a bust in waiting. It's just, it makes no apparent reason at all, or no apparent sense at all, for somebody like Caleb, who's a rookie, to get so much hate despite not even playing a game yet. It's just, people seem to be rooting on Caleb Williams' downfall, and that's why he makes the list of being one of the NFL's most overhated players. What about Justin Herbert, man? This is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league, and yet people always call him overrated. How is he overrated? Where is Justin Herbert rated? We all should agree that Herbert is a top 10 quarterback in the game right now. He has one of the strongest arms. He's one of the most athletically gifted quarterbacks. And he's had to overcome terrible coaching his first couple of years in the league. And normally, when you're in the position that Justin Herbert is in at quarterback and you have to overcome multiple coaching staffs changes, you normally end up being a bust. However, he's been the only reason the Chargers have had the small amount of success that they've experienced over the last couple of years. Brandon Staley's defenses were always garbage. And before that, he had Anthony Lynn as his head coach, and he wasn't even good. Justin Herbert with Jim Harbaugh this season is going to put all of the Justin Herbert is overrated crowd to sleep, because he's actually going to be able to be in a situation where he isn't going to have to carry a team by himself. He actually is going to have a good coach who's going to be able to field a good defense on the field, put a good offensive line in front of him, somebody who's going to give him a legitimate rushing attack. The Justin Herbert hate train, I'm not going to say I understand it to a full extent. But I somewhat understand where people are coming from. It's like you're one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the game. You don't have a playoff win. And I get that. That is a fair criticism of him. You definitely have to hold him accountable for the Chargers choking that 27-0 lead against the Jaguars in the wild card round a few years ago. But we seem to forget that it's a team sport. And there were more reasons than just Justin Herbert not playing that good in the second half against Jacksonville for why they collapsed in that matchup. But just trying to pile all of the Chargers' shortcomings on Herbert is just ridiculous. If you had to pick between Justin Herbert, Tua, and Brock Purdy, we all know who you're picking. If you had to pick between Justin Herbert and Dak Prescott, we also know that the majority of people probably would take Justin Herbert. This is somebody who still has yet to have postseason success only because he's been in a poor situation. The Chargers haven't had any really good head coaches in the history of their franchise until now with the hiring of Jim Harbaugh. Justin Herbert, to me, I don't think that the hate that he gets is necessarily completely warranted. I think some of it is deserved, but most of it to me isn't, because people fail to realize that to be a successful quarterback in this league, to win in the playoffs, it takes more than just being a great quarterback. You need great coaching, you need a good team around you, and a good defense, and that's something that Justin Herbert has never had. Trevor Lawrence is another quarterback that gets overhated. He was playing at a really high level during the first half of the 2023 season until he got injured against the 49ers, and that's when his play started to tail off a little bit during the middle way to late portions of last year. He wasn't healthy, he was really inconsistent with his decision making, and there were games when Trevor Lawrence just looked off and he just looked rattled. But we can't forget about what he did prior to the second half of last season, having Jacksonville at 8-1 with the number one seed in the AFC at one point. And the year before that, he led them to a division title and a playoff win. Jacksonville doesn't have too many postseason wins, and it's been a very long time since they've experienced back-to-back winning seasons. That is because of Trevor Lawrence. And also, think about the impact that Trevor himself has had on the city of Jacksonville. Nobody was going to Jazz games prior to him getting drafted, and they definitely weren't getting primetime games on ESPN and NBC for Sunday Night Football. Trevor has made the Jaguars relevant, not just in the national media's eyes, but also in the Super Bowl conversation. As long as he remains the starting QB in Jacksonville, the Jaguars always have a chance to win a Super Bowl. I believe that he's that good. The only reason that he's getting the amount of hate that he's receiving right now is because people think that he's the most overpaid QB in the game based off what they saw in the second half of 2023. And the 2023 Trevor that we saw in the second half of that season is not the Trevor Lawrence that we saw in 2022 or in the first half of this year. People are going off what they recently saw out of Trevor instead of judging him by his overall body of work, which is pretty small. But to take Jacksonville, the 2 straight winning seasons, an NFC South title, and to pretty much be the best quarterback that they've ever had says a lot for him to be this short into his career. Next up, we got Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson was traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Carolina Panthers earlier during this offseason, and I was really upset to see him go as a Steeler fan. I felt like he was taken for granted in Pittsburgh. This is somebody who's one of the best route runners in the game, creates a lot of separation. He's also pretty good after the catch. He gets called a diva and a locker room cancer by Steeler fans, but I disagree with those sentiments about Deontay, because how are you going to be upset at a wide receiver for being pissed off because his quarterbacks can't get him the damn football? The dude had Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky, and Kenny Pickett throwing him passes. You mean to tell me that you wouldn't be getting frustrated neither? He wasn't the only wide receiver who was visibly frustrated. George Pickens also had some moments when he got frustrated with the trash quarterback play. Going to Carolina is going to do dividends for Deontay Johnson's career, because now he's actually going to be with a good offensive mind and Dave Canales, who's going to find ways to get him the ball. You're going to have a quarterback in Bryce Young who's going to be better than what he had to work with in Pittsburgh this year, depending on if Bryce Young takes that next step. And everybody in the league is about to quickly find out just how underrated Deontay Johnson has been the last couple of years in the league. Because if you want to talk about one of the most underrated and underappreciated players in the game right now, Deontay Johnson definitely belongs in that conversation. This is everything that you want in today's age of what a good wide receiver looks like. Elite route runner, creates a lot of separation. The only problem with him is that his hands can be inconsistent at times. He has had a little bit of the dropsies over the last couple of years, but I'll take a 1,100-yard receiver that gives me 100 receptions, 10 touchdowns in a year, and maybe 7, 8 drops. I think for Carolina, getting Deontay Johnson is going to be a massive improvement to that wide receiver room this year, and he's going to help Bryce Young improve from his awful rookie season. Brock Purdy is the most overhated player in NFL history. You would think that somebody who was the last pick of the draft, who has exceeded expectations, who has beat the odds, took the 49ers to an NFC championship his rookie year, and then to a Super Bowl his second year, would get more respect. But instead, people try to find every single way to demean Brock Purdy for what he's accomplished this short into his career, trying to say he's a game manager, he's only good because of Kyle Shanahan in that system. If that's the case, why was Trey Lance a bust? Why did Brock Purdy take Trey Lance's job? If that's the case, why did Nick Mullins nor C.J. Beathard end up looking like a franchise quarterback under Kyle Shanahan's system, since Brock Purdy only benefits from Kyle Shanahan calling the plays? I don't get the logic. Make it make sense to me for all you Brock Purdy haters out there. If Brock Purdy is only good because of Kyle Shanahan and the weapons that he has around him, why were C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins not the long-term answer at quarterback? What happened to Jimmy Garoppolo? Why was he the place? I'm waiting to hear it. But they won't tell you that, though. If Brock Purdy was a top 5 or top 10 pick, nobody would be giving him the hate that he's getting right now. It's really weird. Instead of giving this man praise for beating the odds, being Mr. Irrelevant, do you not know what Mr. Irrelevant is? It's a meme. They have a celebration for it because nobody takes it seriously. Nobody ever thinks that the last pick of the draft is ever going to turn into anything worthwhile in this league. Brock Purdy, before he got his first in-game action, had no first team reps. He also really didn't get a good understanding of the playbook until later on during his rookie season. And yet, from his first in-game action against the Miami Dolphins till now, he's been nothing short of dominant. He's been a top 10 quarterback ever since that Miami Dolphins game, man. That's how good he's been. He played at an MVP caliber level this year, and yet all people want to say is he's only good because he's throwing the Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. He has Kyle Shanahan calling the plays. Like, please, shut up! Because you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You sound like a stupid casual when you call Brock Purdy overrated. Because I just told you that if Brock Purdy was only good because of Kyle Shanahan, why weren't Trey Lance, C.J. Beathard, and Nick Mullins as good as what Brock Purdy is if he's a product of the system? And another thing that pisses me off about the Brock Purdy hate club out there is how they make it seem like being a system quarterback is a bad thing. Drew Brees was a system quarterback. Tom Brady was a system quarterback. There's nothing wrong with being a system quarterback. That means that the coach calls the plays and you run those plays to the best of their ability. There are so many things that makes Brock Purdy an elite quarterback that never gets talked about because everybody's just so worried about hating on him. He throws with great anticipation, great timing, has great accuracy in the short intermediate ranges of the field. He's really good at escaping pressure, has a little bit of mobility to extend plays with his legs. He also can do some damage on the ground as well. He's a damn good quarterback, man. To me, he's the 7th best quarterback entering this upcoming season. And I'm a little bit annoyed with the amount of hate that he continues to get. People just make it seem like every quarterback that plays for Kyle Shanahan just turns into gold. When we just saw Trey Lance look like dog crap, and now he's on the Dallas Cowboys holding the clipboard for Dak Prescott. I'm so frustrated with the Brock Purdy hate, man. This is one of my favorite players in the league, and I hope he wins a Super Bowl. But you want to know what's going to make me even more upset if Brock Purdy wins a Super Bowl? People still are going to hate on him. They're going to say he only won a Super Bowl because of his supporting cast, when you need a good supporting cast to win in the NFL. Name me one quarterback that's won a championship with a terrible head coach and no good players around him. Please, I'm waiting, Brock Purdy haters. Please tell me a quarterback that's led his team to a Super Bowl with garbage coaching and a garbage team around him. Joe Montana played with Jerry Rice, a Hall of Fame coach, several Hall of Famers on his team. As a matter of fact, Russell Wilson played with a Hall of Fame coach, Hall of Fame caliber running back in Marshawn Lynch, had a Hall of Fame caliber defense with Richard Sherman. You feel me? Cam Chancellor potentially could have been a future Hall of Famer if he would have continued to play. Bobby Wagner. But people just want to push this agenda about how good Brock Purdy is because where he was drafted. We need to stop trying to equate where players were drafted to where their potential is. Just because you're the last pick of the draft doesn't mean that you'll be nothing better than the above average quarterback. You can be the last pick of the draft or a day 3 draft pick and still turn into a Hall of Famer. Antonio Brown was a 6th round pick, and Tom Brady was a 6th round pick too. But you don't hear none of those guys ever receiving the amount of pushback that Brock Purdy gets for people wanting to anoint him as an elite quarterback. Like, the Brock Purdy hate is bullshit, and y'all need to cut it out. Y'all really do. You sound super foolish when you hate on Brock Purdy for him being a great quarterback. Because if he was just a product of Kyle Shanahan's system, then Nick Mullins and C.J. Beathard, they would have been a long-term answer for them. But they weren't. Michael Parsons, normally when you have a Dallas Cowboy player that ends up getting a lot of hate, 9 times out of 10, they deserve it. But Michael Parsons, though, the hate that he gets, I think kind of overdoes it a little bit. Because this is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Ever since his rookie season, he's been one of the best at his position. He also can play a lot of different roles on the defense. He can also be a stand-up linebacker, or you can just have him get after the QB. With his versatility and also the fact that he has done nothing but produce double-digit sack seasons every year in the NFL, but yet he still gets called overrated. People say he needs to spend more time training and focusing on the game than he does focusing on his podcast. And really, his podcast that he has with Bleacher Report is why he's starting to get so much hate, because I guess people have a problem with players having a platform and voicing their opinion on other things that are going on in the NFL, and people get tired of him making excuses for the Dallas Cowboys losing when he's a player. What do you want him to expect? Like, oh yeah, we lost the game. What else do you want him to say? Of course he's going to break down why the game went the way that it did. I mean, I don't see nothing wrong with Michael Parsons having a podcast. I don't agree with the narrative that he's nowhere to be seen in big games, because there's been plenty of big games that I've seen out of Michael Parsons the last couple of years where he's been a monster. Everybody has a bad game. You feel me? Even the best of the best have an off day here and there. Michael Parsons is a top 3, top 4 at worst pass rusher in this game. And I think that the hate that he gets is just a tad bit not necessary. Okay, I think that a good amount of it is warranted. But hating on the dude for having a podcast, man, come on, bro. He's just trying to get to the bag. He's just trying to voice his opinion. And I enjoy listening to Michael Parsons' podcast because he does have a really high football IQ. He does a really good job of breaking down the game for somebody like me to understand who isn't in the NFL. I like Michael Parsons, not just as a player, but as a person as well. I don't get the hate for him having a podcast and him voicing his opinion. Lamar Jackson, man, people been hating on Lamar Jackson ever since that general manager said that he needed to change to a wide receiver. You got people who still continue to throw out these corny, outdated running back jokes about Lamar. And when he won his second MVP, I thought that the Lamar hate would disappear, but people still continue to hate on Lamar Jackson, saying that he's the worst MVP in NFL history. Like, please stop talking, dog. Do you know who has the second best win-loss record in the NFL behind Patrick Mahomes? It's Lamar Jackson. Every time he's healthy, the Ravens are always in the conversation for the 1 seed in the AFC. And I'm not about to call him a playoff choker when he just led Baltimore to the conference championship game this past year. Do you not know how many other quarterbacks failed to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs? There's only one active quarterback in the league right now that has a postseason win against Mahomes, and that's Joe Burrow. That's it. So if you're going to call Lamar Jackson a playoff choker and he's overrated, you have to have that same energy with Josh Allen, Tua Tagovailoa, and all of the other quarterbacks that have fell victim to the greatness of Patrick Mahomes. To me, from a talent standpoint, Lamar is one of the most talented quarterbacks in NFL history. Find me another quarterback that has the athleticism that Lamar Jackson possesses, with the ability to throw the football with precision and accuracy from within the pocket like Lamar can. You can't. He's one of one. There is no Lamar Jackson. He is a way better version of Michael Vick. Michael Vick even admitted that Lamar Jackson is way better than what he ever was. He didn't get to Lamar Jackson's ability to throw the football until later on in his career when he teamed up with Andy Reid in Philadelphia. The Lamar Jackson hate train is just so unnecessary. And I just think at this point, if you're hating on Lamar Jackson, you just have nothing better else to do with your life, because in terms of what you want from your franchise quarterback, it gets nothing better than Lamar Jackson. Not only is he a class act on the field, all the players in the league love him, all the players on the Ravens team love him, but off the field, this dude does a lot for his community. He's always giving back. He's always making time to take pictures with fans. Like, there are a lot of NFL players that you'll come across in person and they'll at Hollywood. They won't even give you the time of day. They'll look at you like a peasant. But Lamar Jackson always makes time out of his day to put the fans first. He does a lot of charity work. He hosts a lot of camps for the youth. Like, how can you hate on Lamar Jackson? Like, if you hate on Lamar, I just think that you're a shitty person. Truthfully, and that may be a little bit harsh, but there's no reason they hate on Lamar Jackson at all. He's the second or third best quarterback in the game. He's a 2-time MVP. He has the second best winning loss record in the National Football League. Like, the Lamar Jackson hate is just so outrageous to me. And every time I see it, I just get so disappointed in NFL fans, man, because as much people who deserve to get hate, Lamar Jackson is not one of them, man. We got to do better. We really do. People who hate on Lamar, I really think they should be banned from having an opinion about the NFL, because if you're just hating on Lamar Jackson, that really shows me that either you don't know football or you care more about trolling than you do anything else. And lastly, I got Kyle Pitts on this list for being one of the most overhated players in the league. This dude is not a bust. The only thing that has held Kyle Pitts back is garbage quarterback play. This dude had Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder throwing him passes the last couple of seasons up there in the A. Who the hell was going to produce good numbers with that much atrocity to work with throwing you passes? The last time Kyle Pitts had a decent quarterback was his rookie season, and that was Matt Ryan. And you saw how Atlanta did Matt Ryan, and you saw how bad the QB play has been ever since they got rid of him. With Kirk Cousins this year, we're going to see Kyle Pitts have a really big season because now you're going to have a solid enough quarterback who can actually throw him the football. And now you got an offensive coordinator who's going to find ways to get him involved in the offense and not a guy like Arthur Smith who is finding ways to get the backup tight end more involved than the dude who they took high in the first round years ago. So this is my list of the NFL's most overhated players going into the 2024 NFL season. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. What players you feel are overhated, who should be on this list, and who shouldn't be on this list. Who on this list do you agree with, and who on this list do you disagree, and who actually deserves the amount of hate that they receive. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in to the live. Shout out to my guy M Sparks. Shout out to my guy Dubs, the Money Man. Shout out to my dude Kate Roan with the $5 donation. He says, I love Lamar. Preach it. Powerful, JT Sports. I appreciate the love, Kate Roan. I appreciate your donation. I appreciate everybody that's tuned in to this afternoon's live stream. If you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're listening on YouTube. If you're tuned in on X, like and retweet the stream. Follow if you're new as well. Remember that we're going to be doing a mailbag episode this weekend. Submit your questions, NFL, college football, in the DMs on Instagram at JTSports_ or on X at JTSports_ if you want your question to be answered in this upcoming mailbag episode that we're going to be shooting. And give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify if you are enjoying this episode. It's free. It only takes 5 to 10 seconds to do. If you enjoy the pod and you want to support us, go ahead, give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast from. The Houston Texans have a great chance to win it all this year. Last year, they took everybody by surprise when they went to the playoffs. They won 10 games, won the NFC South. This offseason, this team with the addition of Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs, and you got CJ Stroud, who right now is in ascension mode. He's one of the best QBs in the game right now. This could be the best offense in the National Football League this year, man. They got the best wide receiving core in the game. You got Stephon and Tank Dell. These are two of the best route runners in the league. At least one of these dudes are going to be open on every passing play that the Texans attempt. And then you got Nico Collins, who's going to be a phenomenal deep threat when CJ Stroud wants to thread the needle downfield. If Houston's offensive line ends up playing at an average or slightly above average level or better this year, y'all better look out for this Texans offense, because how are you going to find a way to get these dudes off the field when they could run the ball against you with Joe Mixon? Joe Mixon is still a really good running back. And then you got a group of wide receivers that at least one person is going to be open every time CJ Stroud goes to drop back. And with the arsenal that CJ is going to be throwing to this year, you mean to tell me that he isn't going to be in the running to win MVP this year? Because he's my MVP pick right now. I know there's probably some other hot candidates out there who people like, but with you throwing to Tank Dell, Stephon, Don Schultz, I mean, it's just impossible for me to see any other quarterback but CJ Stroud winning MVP this year. Hell, we seem to forget for the majority of his rookie season last year, he was in the MVP discussion. Not only could Houston have a top 5, top 10 offense this year, but they also could have a top 10 defense this year. And their defense was really good year one under DeMeco Ryans. But imagine how deadly that unit's going to be this year when you draft Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia in this past year's draft. This dude is an incredible man-to-man press corner. And you pair him alongside of Derek Stingley, who really started to come on last year. And then you also have a safety group that has Jalen Petrie in the back end of things. Okay, I mean, like, this is a really good secondary, but also the pass rush is going to be really good. Will Anderson is going into year 2. He should be in for a double-digit sack season. And then you also picked up Danielle Hunter. The Texans literally have only one problem, and that's their offensive line. And if that unit ends up stepping up this year, I like the Texans to go all the way this year and win it all. They have a good enough team where they can beat Kansas City on the road in Arrowhead. The problem with playing Kansas City is that there are too many quarterbacks that can't come through in the big moments in crunch time. We know that's when Patrick Mahomes is at his best. CJ Stroud, I trust him to step up in the fourth quarter. I couldn't see CJ Stroud choking away a game when a Super Bowl trip is on the line in an AFC championship to Mahomes like Lamar and Josh Allen have done in years prior. CJ Stroud, when you look at him and you hear him talk, this is somebody who always keeps a level head. The moment never gets too bright for him. And this is somebody who galvanizes his team. When he talks to his teammates on the sidelines, they get energized. They believe in what this brother says, and they really believe that CJ Stroud is one of one. I remember watching a couple of mic'd ups last year, and there were several instances where the defenses tried to get a little bit extra with CJ Stroud after the play, and you could tell that those Houston Texans players, they weren't going for it, man. They were ready to knock somebody's block off for messing around with their quarterback, man. That tells you how much faith and confidence they have in CJ Stroud. And I look at him the same way I viewed Andrew Luck early into his career with the Indianapolis Colts. Andrew Luck carried Indianapolis all his years playing there. CJ Stroud, 1 year before he got there, the Texans were in the bottom dweller. Nobody even thought that they were ever going to be contenders ever again. Nobody even thought that they would be playoff contenders again. At least for the next decade or so, we thought that once Bill O'Brien traded away everybody and they got rid of Deshaun, they were going to be in a dark hole of despair for a very long time. But at one offseason, they hired the Miko Ryans, they get CJ Stroud, and all of a sudden, 2 years later, they find themselves right in the thick of the Super Bowl conversation. This is one of the most complete teams heading into this season. You got a great offense. You're going to have a great defense. If I had to give you guys my 3 AFC teams that I have the most confidence in to win it all this year, it would be Kansas City, Baltimore, and Houston right after them. Houston has everything that you need to beat Kansas City in the postseason. You're going to have a great defense. You're going to have a defensive-minded coach that's going to be able to game plan and find a way to slow down Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense. And you're also going to have a guy in CJ Stroud that you can trust to make plays to get you the win, to potentially catapult you into the Super Bowl in the closing minutes of the game. I believe CJ Stroud is going to be the next big thing in this league. To me, he's already a top 5 quarterback, and he has potential to become arguably the second best quarterback after this season if he ends up winning MVP and leading the Texans to the Super Bowl. There are a small crowd of people who consider the Texans to be overrated and a little bit overhyped because of the amount of publicity that CJ Stroud and the Texans team has received this offseason. And I got to disagree with it. Of course, when you have a guy like CJ Stroud that's really marketable and he had the rookie season that he had, everybody's going to be talking about him. So, of course, when you have somebody that had the amount of success that he did and he was able to get a team in Houston that nobody expected too much of them to the postseason, people are going to want to talk about him, and people are going to talk about him in high regard. I'm really high on the Houston Texans this year. I expect them to go really far in the postseason. You're going to have a elite offense and defense. You got a fantastic coaching staff. You got a young quarterback in ascension mode right now. I would be very surprised if Houston's season ends anything other than at least the AFC Championship berth this year. There's a narrative going around that the Chargers offense is lacking talent and they're not going to be that good of a unit this year. And I got to strongly push back against that. You see, when you look at the Chargers offense on paper, there are not really any names that are going to pop out to you. And most of these guys, you probably have no idea who the hell they are, but it doesn't matter. What makes the Chargers offense extremely underrated going into this season is, for one, they're going to have one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL this year. And that's a guarantee, and I'm willing to put some money on it. They got Greg Roman as their offensive coordinator. Now, if you are an OG NFL fan and you really keep up with these coordinator changes and these coordinator hires, you know that Greg Roman is one of the best OCs in the NFL when it comes to maximizing the run game. Everywhere he's been, Baltimore, for the last couple of years, they had an elite rushing attack. They only replaced them because they wanted more out of the passing game. What has been the Chargers' biggest Achilles heel on offense? They can't run the football. That's why they choked that 27-0 lead to the Jaguars in the playoffs a few years back, because they didn't have the ability to play a ball control style of offense. Austin Eckler was not what you call a lead back. He's a scat back. He's not somebody that you just want to carry the bulk load of your run game for. You bring in J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, two running backs that already have a good understanding of Greg Roman's offense in his scheme because they were with him when he was being the play caller up there in Baltimore for the last couple of years prior to last year. He also had a lot of success with the Buffalo Bills and the San Francisco 49ers. He is going to help the Chargers offense become a bully. And that's something that I think you need when you're in the same division as the Kansas City Chiefs, because it's been too easy for them. Now, even though you may not have a talented team on paper, you're going to be a well-coached team and you're going to have identity. Your identity is not going to be just, let's put the ball in Justin Herbert's hands and ask him to carry us. No, your identity is going to be, let's let Justin Herbert allow us to put the ball in his hands to win those games when he has to, but let's also help him out by giving him an elite rushing attack. When Greg Roman got hired by the Chargers, you know what he said in his first interview? People was like, how are you going to help out Justin Herbert? People thought his answer was going to be, oh, we're going to get some better wide receivers for Justin Herbert to throw the ball to. We're going to get some more weapons in the passing game. No, Greg Roman said, could you imagine Justin Herbert with the elite run game? That's the Greg Roman kind of response that I was expecting. People seem to forget that although it's a passing league, you still have to be able to run the football when need be, to take time off the clock and to take some of that pressure off your quarterback. Regardless of how good Patrick Mahomes is, Isaiah Pacheco is a damn good running back. Yes, running backs are easy to replace, but when you find a really good one, let's not act like it isn't a really big benefit to your Super Bowl chances. Another thing that I hear a lot of is how the Chargers don't have any wide receiver. Everybody keeps saying that. Who's playing receiver for the Chargers? They don't have anybody. You don't know about Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey was a second-round pick by the Chargers from this past year's draft out of Georgia. He was one of my top 10 rated receivers coming in. He not only is a very good route runner, but he has fantastic hands. He knows how to create a lot of separation. He also has a lot of acceleration. You're looking at somebody who can go 0 to 100 just like that. And if you're looking for underrated wide receiver to target in your fantasy leagues, look at Ladd McConkey, because he is without a doubt the best wide receiver on this team. And every year, we've always have had a few rookie wide receivers go off, especially the ones that get drafted past the first round, like Puka Nacua last year. Ladd McConkey could have the kind of year that we saw Nacua have last year for the LA Rams. He's that good. This dude was incredibly underrated during the draft process. When you look at what makes a good receiver, elite route running, the ability to create separation, good hands, Ladd McConkey has everything that you want. And the wide receiver that you can look at in Justin Herbert and say, yeah, you can be my go-to guy. You can be the guy that I can lean on in third down situations or big moments when I really need somebody to step up and make a big play. And Greg Roman doesn't really utilize a lot of 3 or 4 wide receiver sets anyway. He's normally somebody that runs a lot of 12 personnel, so a lot of heavy sets because he wants to run the football. The Chargers are going to be a physical tough football team with Jim Harbaugh at the helm as head coach. All they need Justin Herbert to do is just, win the game for them when they put the ball in his hands and they need a game-winning touchdown drive to win. That's when they're really going to need Justin Herbert to step up, and I believe he has the ability to do that. But other than that, I don't think they're going to be relying too much on Justin Herbert, at least compared to what they've done in years past, because now they're going to have the ability to be more than just a one-dimensional football team, which is what the Chargers have been ever since they first drafted Justin Herbert. You need to be able to play complementary football to be a winning football team in today's NFL. You don't need to be a top 5 passing attack and also have a top 5 rushing attack to go along with it. You just have to be able to be balanced when you want to or when you have to. The Chargers now have the ability to do that. This is a really underrated offense. You don't need a great receiving cast to win a championship. Jim Harbaugh, when he first was coaching in the NFL for the 49ers, his best wide receiver was who? Michael Crabtree? Vernon Davis at tight end? None of those guys are going to be future Hall of Famers, and none of those guys were even all that good. There's been so many teams that have won championships not having stacked wide receiving cores. Look at Kansas City. Their best wide receiver was who? Rashee Rice? I mean, come on. Stop overlooking the Chargers because they don't have an insanely talented team with a lot of guys that you know. They're going to have a really good coaching staff. You're going to have an offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, where everywhere he's been, his offenses have produced monstrous numbers on the ground. And also, with Justin Herbert, I think that he's still going to be good, even though he's going to have Greg Roman, where the passing game isn't really his strong suit. Justin Herbert can help elevate Greg Roman and his passing philosophy in the sense. And I think Greg Roman definitely has made a few small tweaks to his offensive personnel and the way that he goes about scheming up things in the passing game due to how things ended with him in Baltimore. But Greg Roman is a really good offensive coordinator. He's definitely a great hire if you're looking for somebody who can maximize what you're going to have in the run game. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins are good enough to get the job done. People need to stop sleeping on the Chargers offense this year and just stop sleeping on the Chargers in general if you are. You can't always judge a team based off talent. Sometimes the things that people judge teams off of aren't always able to be looked upon on paper, such as the impact of great coaching. Let's continue on, man. Listen, I think Mike Tomlin is going to have his first losing season this year if Russell Wilson is the starting quarterback. But if he starts Justin Fields week 1, Justin Fields gives the Steelers a better chance to make it to the playoffs than they do with Russell Wilson. Even though Russ is a better passer than Justin Fields, which at this point of his career, I don't think is by that big of a margin, Justin Fields makes the Steelers' offense so scary when it comes to the run game. You put Justin Fields at quarterback in that backfield with Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, one of the best running back duos in the league, this instantly becomes a top 5 rushing attack. And you can find a way to have a sustainable offense with the top 5 rushing attack, with Justin Fields' ability to run the football at a high level, and with the running backs that he has behind him in the backfield, capable with the improved offensive line. The Steelers want to be a run-heavy team anyway. And if the offensive line is as good this year as what Steeler fans believe that it will be, then who cares if Justin Fields holds on to the ball too long? Chicago's offensive line wasn't that good last year. So if you have an offensive line in Pittsburgh that's better than what he had to work with in Chicago, and he's holding the ball for 3 seconds and the Steelers' O-line gives him 4 seconds to pass, then who gives a damn if he holds on to the ball too long when the offensive line is going to give him enough time to find open wide receivers? Justin Fields has a lot of untapped potential that I think Arthur Smith could end up being able to unleash. Desmond Ridder wasn't that bad in certain games that I watched. The problem with Desmond Ridder was that he would move you downfield, but once you get into the red zone, that's where his flaws got magnified. He didn't really do a good job of taking care of the football, and that's a big no-no when you're a QB in today's NFL. You can't have turnovers, especially once you get inside the red zone area. I look at a guy in Justin Fields, and I see somebody that just has so much potential and so much upside compared to a guy in Grandpa Russ who's 35 years old and is on the decline. Justin Fields, with the talent that the Steelers have, you got George Pickens, who is one of the better deep threats in the league. Justin Fields is one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL. He also was one of the highest graded quarterbacks in passes for 20 plus yards or more, according to PFF. There are some really big strengths in Justin Fields' game that could be a really big asset to the Steelers this year. Russell Wilson isn't that good of a passer, and there's not a big gap between him and Justin Fields. Russell Wilson can't see in the middle of the field, and Justin Fields struggles to read defenses. Both of these QBs have their flaws. I don't really think there's a big gap between them, but where there is a big gap is Justin Fields' playmaking ability and his athleticism compared to Russell Wilson's. Yes, it is a passing league, but the Steelers aren't going to do a lot of damage throwing the football. And Justin Fields is a better fit in Arthur Smith's system than what Russell Wilson is because it's play action pass based. Getting your quarterback outside the pocket and letting him move and utilize his legs. Justin Fields is a better fit because he's just a better athlete than what Russell Wilson is. We seem to forget that he's one of the best dual threat quarterbacks of all time statistically. And not too long ago, he finished top 10 in MVP voting. The upside is there. You have a quarterback that if it wasn't for Chicago having the #1 overall pick and the ability to draft one of the greatest quarterback prospects ever, he still would have been their starter. I think right now Justin Fields is a better QB than what Russell Wilson is. If Russell Wilson was still good, Denver wouldn't have taken an all-time high dead cap hit to get rid of him. I really believe that the way the Steelers season is going to go this year is that they start out 2-5, they bench Russell Wilson, and then all of a sudden they go on a win streak with Justin Fields. Mike Tomlin, with the kind of coach that he is, being a great motivator, he's going to be able to speak to Justin Fields' soul. He's going to be able to get Justin Fields believing in himself and playing his best football. I really believe that Justin Fields is going to be the answer for the Steelers at quarterback this year. With what he brings to the run game, it's going to have a way bigger impact than anything that Russell Wilson is going to bring to the table. The Steelers aren't going to have a good passing game with Russ. At best, this is a top 18 passing attack. But with Justin Fields, though, your passing attack still won't be that good, but your rushing attack, though, is going to be good enough that could catapult you to having another winning season and making it to the postseason if you're Mike Tomlin. Because the Steelers' identity is going to be running the football. And you're not really going to be able to have the amount of creativity that you would with Justin Fields at the helm if you start Russell Wilson. I'm a really big believer in Justin Fields and what he could potentially do in the black and gold this season if given the opportunity. And I really disagree with how the Steelers have handled this quarterback situation. Russell Wilson hasn't shown us anything since he got traded from Seattle to show us that he should be given the starting quarterback job without receiving competition for it. The Steelers said that this was going to be a quarterback battle, and we've yet to see it because all they've done is pretty much given Russell Wilson the keys to the Ferrari. And at this point, it looks like Russell Wilson is going to crash that thing only a month of having the keys. I'm excited to see what Justin Fields does this year when his number gets called, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when he ends up starting this year, because it's going to happen. I don't see Russell Wilson lasting. That's not me hating. That's just me being honest. Quarterbacks can't play at a high level for their whole entire career. Eventually, they start to regress, and we've seen significant regressing out of Russell Wilson the last couple of years he's been in Denver. Meanwhile, you look at Justin Fields, this is somebody that still has a lot of potential that has yet to be unleashed. So I would love to see Justin Fields get the opportunity to be the starter for a QB this year. Well, the starting QB this year for Pittsburgh, because I think he gives the Steelers the best chance to have a winning season this year. Before we move on to the college football portion of this episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Remember that you can also find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Follow us on our social media platforms. You can find us on Instagram at JT Sports __ and on Instagram at JT Sports _. Follow us on TikTok. I want to give you guys a little bit of some news in terms of what we're going to be doing on the channel moving forward. Starting next week, we are going to be unveiling our record predictions, college football, NFL. That's what we're going to be spending the next 2 weeks doing. Every day, we're going to do either college football predictions for a Power 4 conference, or we're going to be doing some kinds of predictions for the NFL, rather that be record predictions or over-under win totals, or predicting who ends up winning the awards, who ends up winning the Super Bowl this year. Just know that next week starts the start of prediction season for us over here on JT Sports. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we go live and when we drop new content. We're about to have some more guests on the pod as well over the next couple of weeks. So we got a lot of big things coming with the college football and NFL seasons just around the corner. I don't know what it is about Georgia football players, but at this point, Kirby Smart needs to take away the keys for all his players, because anytime they get out into the streets, they just have this, don't include that in the cut, man. Don't include that in the cut. Kirby Smart has some problems down there in Athens, Georgia. I don't know what it is with his players, but anytime they get into the streets with their cars, they always got to get into some kind of racing, man. I don't know why these players just can't say, you know what? Why not just try to focus on being an NFL player versus trying to make it into being a NASCAR driver? I don't know what these Georgia players be thinking anytime they get into their automobiles, but Kirby Smart needs to make some massive changes, because right now with these two Georgia players getting arrested, and Samal Munden and Bo Hughley, who recently got arrested this past week on reckless driving charges, this is an issue that has plagued Georgia for the last couple of years, and you wonder if Kirby Smart is ever going to get a hold of it. You feel me? Because if Kirby Smart is as good as a coach as we believe him to be, you also believe that he's not worried about his players becoming the best football players they can be, but also the best people they can become. You feel me? And with them just being allowed to street race at will, I'm just looking at Kirby Smart. I'm like, bro, like, how are you still allowing these issues to transpire? There have been more Georgia players arrested for street racing or reckless driving than any other program in the nation. And Ollie Gordon, the running back for Oklahoma State who won the Doak Walker Award last year, he got arrested for DUI. But Georgia players, I mean, they're getting arrested for DUIs, reckless driving, street racing. Hell, Jalen Carter damn near had one of his teammates killed because he was racing him. And I'm not saying that's Jalen Carter's fault for why that transpired, but it's just when you think about the magnitude of the Jalen Carter incident, you would have thought that that would have been the breaking point for Kirby Smart. You thought he would have said, you know what, no more of this racing stuff. You racing, you're automatically suspended 1 game. He has to put his foot down with this, because at this point, man, like, when you go to Georgia, Kirby Smart might just be pitching you, hey, not only do you have a chance to make it to the NFL, but if you don't, you potentially could have a career as a NASCAR driver. Georgia needs to get ahead of these issues. I think Kirby Smart is the best coach in college football. He's my favorite coach right now, but it's just really disappointing to see all of the off-the-field incidents that these Bulldog players find themselves in, stemming from their inability to I don't know what it is and how to describe it, but maybe they just have somewhat of an adrenaline rush for racing, and they just gotta do it because it makes them feel good. It releases some toxins in the brain that make them feel good. I think they call it dopamine. So I guess anytime these Georgia players race, they just get a dopamine rush, and that's why they always continue to do it. But at this point, when you're Kirby Smart and you're running a team that's in the championship conversation every single year, you don't want to risk losing one of your best players' lives to, getting in a fatal car accident due to the reckless driving that they do off the field. It's just Kirby Smart has to implement some restrictions, some rules, some guidelines on his players. He has to say, hey, after a certain time, you aren't able to drive. I know you may say, man, JT, these are grown men. You can't put that on them. I mean, at this point, you got to do something if you're Kirby Smart. If they keep on making the same mistakes time in and time out, I mean, eventually something has to change. What is Georgia going to do to get a hold of this? So Georgia has a big problem with their players loving the race, loving to do reckless driving, driving under the influence. I saw a video last year where Stetson Bennett was drunk under the influence. I think he had like some incident where he got into it for public intoxication or something like that. It's just for Georgia, for a team to be as good as what they are and always being seen as a national championship contender every year, you just expect a little bit more off the field from this program. We know that none of these guys are perfect. They're young. Everybody makes mistakes. But holy cow, man, it's like every day you hear something about a Georgia player getting into trouble for reckless driving or speeding, man. It's just drive to where you need to go, drive back to campus, and get back safe, man. There's been too many people that have lost their lives to drunk driving or reckless driving, from Henry Ruggs to the Rasheed Rice incident. Like, you think these players will learn after what happened with the Jalen Carter incident? Apparently not, man. Kirby Smart, take your players' keys and just ban them from driving at this point. Florida State and Clemson, we already know that they're looking to get out of the ACC. It's not a matter of when, it's a matter of... Can't talk today, man. Don't include that neither. Florida State and Clemson, we already know that they're looking to leave the ACC. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And at this point, you would think that it's pretty much a given that they're going to end up in either the Big Ten or the SEC. But according to recent reports, the Big Ten isn't interested in Clemson and Florida State because they don't meet their academic criteria. And the SEC doesn't really have any interest in adding another Florida or Carolina school, which means that Florida State and Clemson's next best option is the Big 12. Yeah, people. According to a recent report from Ross Dellinger, Clemson and Florida State are in early conversations with the Big 12 Conference. The two ACC schools would prefer to join the Big 10 or SEC. However, the SEC isn't looking to add any more schools that are in the same state in the Big 10. They prioritize academics over everything. And I think that the Big 12 was always going to be the best move for Clemson and Florida State because, listen, I get that with conference realignment, nothing can ever be ruled out, but I don't think these conferences really want to keep adding teams because when you already do your television deal and you add new teams, that means that eventually with more teams entering the conference, when you re-up on your new television deal, there's going to be a bigger slice of the pie that everybody's not going to be able to receive when you add more teams, because schools like Clemson and Florida State, when you add them to your conference, if you're the Big Ten and you have to re-up on your new deal, some of the other teams may not be in favor of having to further split up the revenue, adding more teams. A lot of these schools are really greedy. And if you're Ohio State and Michigan, yeah, Ohio State may love to play Clemson and Florida State every single year within their conference, but at the same time, do you really want to sacrifice the amount of money that you're going to get? Because right now, if you're getting $50 million, $40 million a year, and then you add Clemson and Florida State, you could end up only getting about $35 million a year because there's more faces that you have to feed. The SEC is kind of the same way. So I can get why some of these conferences are hesitant to add blue bloods like Clemson and Florida State, even though they do have the blue blood tag, and you would think that any conference would jump at the opportunity to add them because they bring in a lot of popularity and ratings. They both have massive fan bases, but the Big 12 makes more sense because in the Big 12, maybe you could find a way to get a little bit of that revenue going that they have, and you can get a little bit of a share in that. And also, Brent Umark, the new Big 12 commissioner, he's been making a lot of moves to get Big 12 or get the Big 12 more funding outside of just college football, whether that be, coming to a naming rights agreement with All-State, so you end up being named the All-State Big 12 Conference, or the Big 12 presented by All-State, and All-State pays you like a good sum of money for those naming rights, and you split that amongst the teams. And I think the Big 12, what they're doing is a little bit more innovative. I don't see the SEC and the Big 10 trying to get any partnerships or sponsorships going with outside college football brands. Maybe if you're Florida State and Clemson, you join the Big 12 may not be that big of a bad thing. If anything, it could be a good thing for you because you can join a conference where you don't have to worry about competing for the top every year with Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, and Michigan. If you go to the Big 12, not only does it give you an easier path to the college football playoffs, but you also are going to get more funding from making it to the playoffs because every team that makes it to the playoffs, they normally end up having an incentive and the coaching contracts that if a coach makes it to the postseason, they get like $100K bonus or something like that. So if you being in the playoffs, you're going to get some additional money from that. And then your conference also is going to be giving you a slice of things from their television deal and plus the other partnerships that they're going to be doing in the Big 12. The Big 12 has a really good commissioner. This dude, Brett Umark, he single-handedly saved the Big 12 from being extinct just like the Pac-12. You see, unlike the Pac-12, the Big 12 got on the proactive side of things. They weren't ready for things to go haywire. They just said, hey, like, Oklahoma and Texas are making moves. The Big Ten's making moves. We need to make a move before somebody ends up making a move on us and taking away some of our top teams. So what do? They add BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, and then they also add a couple of Pac-12 schools. If you're Florida State and Clemson, you get into the Big 12, I think that you're getting more respect in that conference than what you would if you were in the SEC or in the Big 10, because when you join the Big 10 and SEC, like, yeah, you're Florida State and Clemson, but you're not as big as a brand as what Ohio State and Michigan are. And if you go to the SEC, I mean, yeah, you're a big brand there, but you're still going to be overlooked by Texas, Georgia, Alabama. I mean, if I was Clemson and Florida State, I would rather go to the Big 12, where the Big 12, they're making good money. Not the same amount as what the Big 10 and SEC schools are, but it's way better than what you were getting in the ACC. And the thing about the Big 12 is that with how good their commissioner is, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up finding a way to make sure that these Big 12 schools get as much money as what these SEC and Big 10 schools are making. Now, most of that money probably won't come from the television deal, but it will come from, partnerships and sponsorships from outside entities, which is how I think the Big 12 is going to be able to make up for the gap in pay between them and the other conferences out there. I like Florida State and Clemson in the Big 12 because if they join the Big 12, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a domino effect. You're going to have probably Miami that is going to want to follow Florida State, and then you're going to have North Carolina that's probably going to want to get out. Virginia Tech, they could be interested. I could see Virginia going to the Big 10. Same thing with Virginia Tech. I think both of those two universities are held in pretty high regard when it comes to their academics. Same thing with North Carolina. But for Miami, I could see you going to the Big 12 too. And then the Big 12 has a good possibility of saying, you know what, if the SEC and the Big 10 don't want to own the Florida media market, we'll go ahead and own it. You got UCF, Florida State, and Miami in the same conference, and you will own Florida's media market. Tallahassee, I mean, it's Tallahassee. It ain't really nothing going on in Tallahassee really all that much. Only thing you got in Tallahassee is all of the parties that be going on for what they be doing at FAMU. You go down to Orlando. Orlando is a really highly attractive tourist attraction due to the theme parks, the amount of things that there is to do down there in Central Florida. And then Miami, I mean, it's South Beach. Who doesn't love South Beach? I remember a few spring breaks ago, I believe this was my sophomore year of college. Dog, I ran into Floyd Mayweather. Do you not know how many celebrities you can find in South Florida? Like, there are so many potential media opportunities that the Big 12 could take advantage of if they tap into that South Florida media market. I've always felt like the move for Clemson and FSU was always going to be the Big 12. Now, of course, things can change. We know that at first, it wasn't always a sure thing that Texas and Oklahoma were going to enter the SEC. But eventually, you know, people put their egos aside and they made it happen. And they very well could do the same thing. Maybe Florida says, you know what, okay, Florida State can come. And maybe South Carolina says, you know what, F it, just go ahead at Clemson. You feel me? But going into the Big 12, I think that not only would it be beneficial from both parties, the Big 12 will add 2 blue bloods. They would be seen as more as just the other power conference outside of the SEC and the Big Ten, because now you add Clemson and Florida State and potentially a couple of other schools out of ACC. Now you actually got to take the Big 12 serious now. Now you really could say there is a Big 3. And plus, if you're Clemson and Florida State, you may have the benefit of maybe getting some more amenities thrown in your favor just because of the brand that you are, being in a conference that at this moment doesn't have any brands as big as what you are, at least from a popularity standpoint. Right now, the most popular team in the Big 12 is Colorado, only because of Deion Sanders. And once Deion Sanders leaves Colorado, then they're pretty much going to be irrelevant, and that's where everybody's going to be looking at Florida State and Clemson as the dudes who are going to be carrying the load for that conference. And if you can get them to join and you get Miami, maybe NC State to join, I think the Big 12 becomes a pretty formidable conference. I already think it's a pretty good conference. They got a lot of potential based off where a lot of these teams that are joining are located, especially UCF. UCF, they've moved to the Big 12 and they just have amped up everything. They are putting more money into their football program. They're upgrading their facilities. The recruiting has taken a massive leap of improvement as well. I think this past recruiting cycle, that was the best one that they've ever had in program history. So the move for Clemson and Florida State may not be the Big 10 or the SEC. We could see them playing Big 12 football whenever they decide to make their move from the ACC. Now, what does this move potentially mean for the ACC? I mean, let's just be honest. You lose Florida State and Clemson, it's over. Those are your 2 biggest brands. Similar to what we thought about the Big 12. We thought once the Big 12 lost Oklahoma and Texas, they were done. But they were able to find a way to suffice. And I think you could see the same thing happen if you are the ACC, if you lose Clemson and Florida State. I mean, maybe you could add a couple of G5 schools. Maybe you merge with the Mountain West or the American, but I don't think that would be enough to really make you still be seen as a legitimate power conference. I think you could stay around, but I think realistically, once you lose FSU and Clemson, you're no longer going to be viewed as a legitimate power conference anymore. Now it just would be the Power 3. And if you lose some more schools like Miami and NC State, if you can't keep them, then that's really when your conference is going to fall apart. I don't think Clemson and Florida State leaving is going to be the death blow for the ACC. I think what the death blow for the ACC will be is if you can't keep no more teams from leaving past Clemson and Florida State, then that's when things get really scary for you in terms of how long you're going to be able to stay around. But yeah, these are my thoughts on the rumors about Florida State and Clemson potentially joining the Big 12 conference. And speaking of Clemson, I think that Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers are being severely overlooked this year because of Dabo's stubbornness to utilize the portal. I get that in today's age of college football, utilizing the transfer portal nearly seen as a must if you want to be a championship team. But I'm not ready to write off Clemson just yet because Dabo seems to be stuck in his ways, because we don't know if Dabo's way is still a winning way to being a championship contender still. When you recruit at the level that Clemson does, which is still pretty much at a top 5, top 10 level, you really don't need to go into the portal unless it's for 2 or 3 guys to fill some holes that you have at certain positions that you can find immediate fixes for right away. But Dabo Swinney has always been about player development. And Clemson still does a really good job of getting players drafted high at the next level. They just had a cornerback who got drafted in the first round by the Baltimore Ravens, and they had a couple of defensive linemen that got drafted in the later rounds also. So Clemson still is really good at development and getting guys ready for the next level. I think that the problem with Clemson hasn't just been their lack of use in the transfer portal. I really think it's been their lack of production on offense, which I think that's going to change this year because you got Garrett Riley going into year 2. And raise your hand if you knew that Garrett Riley was Lincoln Riley's brother. Like, I did not know that until a few months ago. I knew the name sounded familiar. Garrett Riley, like, is he really related to Lincoln Riley? I went to the Google search. I was like, oh, shit. Lincoln Riley has a brother? Okay, so if you're Lincoln Riley's brother, I would expect for this offense to get going sooner rather than later. And with what they have at wide receiver this year, I really believe that Clemson's offense is going to be back. At one point, Clemson had a run where they weren't up there with Ohio State and LSU for being wide receiver U, but they did have a nice little run where they were consistently pumping out NFL level wide receivers, from your Sammy Watkins to your Mike Williams of the world, your DeAndre Hopkins. I think the last good NFL wide receiver they had was Justin Ross, and he went undrafted. Well, you got a lot of good wide receivers coming into this season. Not only do you have a lot of experience coming back at that position, but you got some really promising true freshmen who could step up. You're always good at running back. Phil Maffa is going to be replacing Will Shipley. I don't really expect a big drop-off there. Your offensive line should be really good. You hired Matt Luke from Georgia. He's one of the better offensive line coaches in America. Cade Klubnik, if he can step up his play and he improves this year, this is going to be a really good offense. The weapons are there at wide receiver. The offensive line play hopefully should end up playing good. I mean, I could see Clemson's offense being the best that they've been since they last went to the national championship with Trevor Lawrence. And the reason for why this offense has been so inconsistent over the last couple of years has been because you've had poor play calling mixed in with the issues on the offensive line and not really having good receivers. Well, now a lot of those issues should be gone this year. And we already know defensively, Clemson always has a good defense. And this year, they're stacked everywhere. They got a lot of NFL guys on the D-line and the back end of that secondary. The key games for Clemson this year are going to be week 1 against Georgia. I'm not expecting you to beat Georgia, but I at least want to see you be competitive against Georgia, because if you get blown out by Georgia, I don't know if I can still consider you to be an elite program anymore. I'm not used to seeing Clemson get dragged by the best teams in college football. I know that they got embarrassed last year against Duke, and that definitely was an embarrassing loss, but let's not forget that they almost beat Florida State last year. If it wasn't for that missed field goal that they had late in that game, they would have won that game. We seem to forget about that. NC State, that's going to be a challenging one because NC State is viewed as a dark horse contender in the ACC this year. You got to play Florida State on the road. You got Louisville. Virginia Tech could be a tricky game, especially if Virginia Tech is undefeated by that point, which they got a very good chance of being able to be undefeated. You got South Carolina, which you can never overlook. The Beamer boys, especially with what they've done to you in the past. The floor for Clemson is 8-4, which isn't that impressive. But the ceiling for this program is 11-1. For me, I probably would go with them being closer to 11-1 than them being closer to 8-4. I think that this is the best team that Clemson has had in 3 years. They're good at every area. They don't really have any glaring weaknesses. They have concerns. I don't think the offensive line is going to be as bad as what it's been in the past, and I really think that it could end up being a strength for Clemson. Clemson, I'm not going to say that Dabo's reluctantness to use the portal is going to be the reason for the demise. Okay, because it's not like Georgia and Alabama are fully assembling their squads from the portal. What they do is they get a couple of guys here and there that want to come play for them, and if they're good enough, they say, okay, you can come play for us. Like Jahmyr Gibbs reached out to play for Alabama. I'm pretty sure the players that are transferring to Georgia may not be reaching out to them. They may be reaching out to Georgia, because Georgia doesn't have to reach out to nobody. This is Georgia. They recruit better than anybody else. They always have 5 and 4 stars at every position. So when one guy transfers, another guy that they recruited can step up and get the job done. For Clemson, I think that's the same thing. I'm not about to write off Dabo Swinney. One thing I've learned about Dabo Swinney is that every time you count him out, he always ends up showing you why you made a mistake doing so. Okay, and I still believe this dude is a fantastic coach. He's a great motivator. His players believe in him. And I like the fact that he still is willing to live and die by his morals. He's not willing to bend his beliefs. And I feel if Clemson ends up having another disappointing season, that Dabo Swinney possibly could retire. He seems like one of those dudes that he'll die before ever having to change his philosophy. And I really think that he's strongly against utilizing the transfer portal, because what people don't understand about the portal is that to get guys out of the portal, you got to cut a few dudes who are on scholarship. And I have a few friends that, you feel me, they've gotten that unfortunate phone call that, hey, like, we don't think we're going to have a spot for you on this year's team. And they've had to hit that portal. And it's a really hard conversation to have, especially when you recruit these guys and you promise their parents that, hey, yeah, your son is going to be in good hands when he comes to Clemson, all to get rid of him. And not only do you keep a guy from playing football, but you also take away a guy's scholarship, and now he has to pay for his education, and now you affect the guy's ability to get a degree, which still could change his life if he's not able to make a career in the NFL. So I agree somewhat with Dabo Swinney's stance on the portal. I don't think the portal is the end-all, be-all, and I'm rooting for Clemson to have success because, I as much as I love the transfer portal, I don't like talking to my friends that play D1 ball, and I'm asking them how they're doing, how their football careers is going. They're like, bro, like, those boys told me I had to hit the portal, fam. You feel me? And this isn't me making up anything. Like, I really got a good amount of homeboys that play college football that have told me verbatim that, their coach told them that they didn't have a spot for them. They took their scholarship away. You feel me? It's really tough in today's college football. What the fans don't understand, and, fans just think that, it's easy to use the portal. No, like, it's some benefits from using the portal, but it's also a detriment, because it kind of makes you a little bit of a villain. And I don't think Dabo Swinney has the heart to be viewed as a villain, which is why I believe that he'd rather retire than to have to change his stance and use the transfer portal. Because I don't think he's willing to cut guys, and I don't think he wants to cut guys. And as a coach, I wouldn't want to do it neither. So for Dabo Swinney, I still believe that Clemson is good enough to be a playoff caliber football team. Could they compete for a national title this year? I wouldn't go that far, but they definitely could win a playoff game or two. I still think that they have one of the best rosters in college football entering this season, at least top 10, because they still recruit really well. Like, look at how good their recruiting class is right now. They're still getting like 5 and 4 star guys, and you got people saying, how the hell is Clemson still getting these dudes? Well, Clemson still is a really good school to go to when it comes to being developed and getting to that next level. So I'm not ready to write off Clemson yet, just because Dabo has some stubbornness to utilizing the transfer portal, because I still believe that he still is really good at developing players and getting them ready for the next level. And I think with the squad that Clemson has entering this year, you got a lot of experience. You're going to have guys like Cade Klubnik that are going into like their third years where they're pretty much seasoned veterans. So you should see more consistent play out of them. And I believe that Clemson is the second best team in the ACC going into this year behind Miami. If there's anybody who should be favored to win this conference, it is Clemson instead of Florida State, because unlike Florida State, Clemson has recruited at a better level than them, and they've been way more consistent at being able to sustain having elite talent on their team without having to get guys from the portal, because not everybody that you get from the portal ends up being a massive upgrade. There are some guys that you get from the portal that you end up whiffing on. So there's no guarantee that you're going to get somebody that can come in and fill a hole from you just because they're coming from the portal. I still think that player development, recruiting guys out of high school and developing them to their peak potential is the key to winning. But you just mix that in somewhat with the transfer portal. But I still believe in Dabo Swinney's ways. I'm not about to question him. I still think that he's one of the better coaches in college football, top 5, top 10. And I'm ready to see what Clemson does this year. I can see them going 10-2. Man, I can't find my chapstick nowhere. But the last thing I want to get into is this. The SEC is going to be madness this year, man. I can see a lot of chaos happening in this conference this year. Texas and Georgia have the 2 best odds to win this thing, but really anybody could win the SEC this year, which is why it's going to be so chaotic this year, because there could be 8 to 9 teams from this conference that are good enough to make it into the college football playoffs this year. I mean, even Oklahoma and Texas A&M could win the SEC this year. You got Missouri, who could win it. You got Tennessee, LSU, Alabama with Kalen DeBoer. Ole Miss could be some new blood in the conference title game. The SEC is going to come down to 2 schools not named Georgia and Texas this year. That's one of my biggest predictions, or one of my bold predictions for this year, is that Georgia and Texas won't make it to the SEC championship game, because there are other teams in this conference who are as good or not too far off from as good as what Georgia and Texas is. And really, Georgia's the best team in this conference, and then it's really everybody else. Although Texas does recruit at the level that Georgia does, I don't think defensively on their D-line they're as good as what Georgia is on that unit. Ole Miss, we know that they can score points in bunches, and they got a really stacked offense. Defensively, though, that's where the question lies. Now, Pete Golding, he's going to be having a lot of talented guys coming in from the transfer portal on the defensive end. A lot of the guys that they got from the portal on defense were top 100 rated guys or better. So the talent definitely is there for Ole Miss to make it to the SEC championship. Plus, they got the easiest schedule out of every team in this conference. And the only loss I really see Ole Miss taking is to Georgia, potentially. Alabama, they could make it too. Kalen DeBoer in his first 2 years at Washington led them to a national championship, a Pac-12 title, and this dude has won everywhere he's been. I think that he's Nick Saban reincarnated. He could win the SEC in his first year at Alabama with them still having a top 5 team from a talent standpoint. It's not like once Nick Saban retired, everybody upped and transferred out. And there were some guys who played for Kellen DeBoer at Washington who were really good, who followed him down to Tuscaloosa. So the talent's still there for them to win it. LSU, we know that they have talent. The question is, is Brian Kelly going to be able to suffice against other coaches who are as good or better than what he is? And do they have their issues on the defensive side of the ball fixed? We know that they have an improved coaching staff. They got one of the best defensive coaching staffs in America with what they brought together, but is the coaching going to be able to overcome the lack of talent that they have in certain areas on that defense? Now, Tennessee, Missouri, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, even Kentucky, they're all wild cards. I really love Oklahoma this year. A lot of people are not giving Oklahoma the respect that they deserve. You talk about a team that's been recruiting at an SEC level. Brent Venables and Oklahoma have been bringing in nothing short of top 10 classes, and they've done a really good job of developing the guys that they've been getting from recruiting. A lot of the experience that they return on defense, a lot of those guys were 4 and 5 stars coming out of high school, and nobody's talking about how good Oklahoma's defense is going to be this year. This was one of the best defenses in college football when it came to forcing takeaways, and the only thing that they struggled with was getting after the quarterback. Well, they improved that area of their defense. They got a few guys who can get after the passer in the transfer portal. They got a really good defensive tackle that everybody wanted, and Dominic Williams out of TCU. You know, I look at a school like Kentucky, even Kentucky. You want to know why? Because if they get good quarterback play, they potentially could win 10 games because they're one of the best teams in the SEC in the trenches. Their offensive line is good and their defensive line is good. They're going to have a lot of NFL guys that get drafted from their offensive and defensive lines. So the SEC is going to be complete chaos this year, man. If you're betting on a team to win this conference, don't. Because I really don't know who's going to win it. It could be Ole Miss. It could be Bama. It could be a school like Oklahoma and Kentucky. Like, you got Georgia, and then you got everybody else. But Georgia's up here. Everybody else is, like, right here. Because Texas is bringing in top 10, top 5 recruiting classes. You got Oklahoma, who's still recruiting at a high level. Texas A&M is still recruiting at a top 10 level. Alabama's not too far off from recruiting at where Georgia is. The only question is they got a new coaching staff. Are they going to be able to make it work? But the SEC, this is the most excited I've been to watch this conference in the last couple of years, man, because with Texas and Oklahoma joining this thing, it just adds a sense of unpredictability that we haven't had in the last couple of years. Like, the last couple of years, we've always known that it was either going to be Georgia and then probably Alabama playing in the SEC championship. But this year, though, we could get an SEC championship game that doesn't feature neither Alabama or Georgia. And that's what makes the SEC so chaotic this year, in my opinion, man, because anybody can win it. Ole Miss is good enough to win this conference. We just get so tied to the brand and the decal on the side of the helmet that we fail to assess teams for what they are at this moment. And there are a lot of teams in this conference who are not only just good enough to win it, but they potentially could compete for the national championship. Hell, I love Tennessee. I thought that Tennessee was going to be a 10-win team, but when I was doing my record predictions last night, I was like, ooh, I thought A&M was going to be a 9-win team. I did my record prediction last night. I had them going 7-5, 8-4. I was like, ooh. Kentucky, I was like, ooh. Oklahoma, I was like, ooh. It's like, you look at the SEC, man, like, this is a really tough conference to predict. The Big Ten is going to come down to Oregon and Ohio State, but in terms of depth, from top to bottom, there are about 8 to 9 teams in this conference who are good enough to make it into the postseason. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Like I said, starting next week, we're going to be doing predictions, college football, NFL. NFL training camp is just around the corner, which means that football season is in the air. I appreciate everybody that's been tuned in to all of the off-season lives and been watching all the content we've been putting out. We got 22 total viewers. Shout out to everybody that's listening on YouTube and X. Hit that like button, share the live stream if you enjoy. Remember that we're not just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you enjoy, give us a 5-star review. My guy Chris Brady asked, does anybody else think West Virginia could be a sleeper pick to win the conference? They could be. Courtney Miller says Big Ten, SEC are top conferences. The Big 12 is boo-boo. Yeah, man, I think the Big 12 is pretty weak too, but you have Florida State and Clemson. That could make that conference really tough. But I appreciate everybody that tuned in. I'll see you guys Monday